Well, as you can see, I'm out in the garden. It's about 4:30 in the evening, and I'm doing a bit of organic weeding. In other words, I'm using my object I got on Lazada to, it's like a hoe, but it does the job pretty easily. You know, while I'm sitting here, you can't help but think. And one of the things that comes to mind is more and more often with the people who contact me by way of emails and different methods, telephone, messenger, WhatsApp, not so much WhatsApp, but certainly messenger. I start to realize that there are, not generalizing here either, there's a certain element in many Filipinos that even though it's a country of great emphasis on Catholicism and the church, their morals tend to not follow the teaching necessarily of the church. Now, what I'm meaning is that quite often I discover that a wife, a girlfriend, that the foreigner has contacted me about, talking about how his life is perfect, wonderful. He met her so many years ago, and they got married, maybe even had children. But I also then discover that it's not too hard trolling through some of the Facebook comments and postings. You find that many Filipinos have more than one Facebook, and often the husband is blissfully unaware that this is in fact the case. And a lot of these guys are late 70s, maybe even early 80s, and then they're unaware that their wives are basically attempting to kindle some form of a relationship with another person, another man maybe, or even another woman, I don't know, whatever takes their fancy, I suppose. But irrespective of it, it's going on. And it leaves me with a little bit of a dilemma here because, whilst I don't agree with it, and I accept that people can be unfaithful no matter where they are, it's not necessarily a Filipino thing. It, it's a little bit unsettling in the sense that you create a sort of a friendship with the foreigner and you become a bit like a buddy. And I suppose, normally speaking, a buddy would have a quiet word with the wife and say, well, dear, Jimmy over there is being a good husband. Why are you doing this or doing that? Well, of course, she's probably going to deny it anyway and do her level best to put you in the bad books so her husband and boyfriend doesn't get too much chance to let the beans spill. She might stop that particular relationship and maybe head for another one later when the waters have calmed a bit. But it is a difficult dilemma because to say it doesn't happen would be naive, but to say it could never happen is just burying one's head in the sand, because Filipinos are a bit like when in the 60s was in the West, Woodstock and free love. They don't have the same love or sexual, necessarily, honesty and what's the word? Honor and obey, like the word escapes me. Anyway, I'm sure you'll remind me. But it's a one-man person at a time. That's what I'm meaning. And to know this, to have to keep this from a person that you become quite friendly with, can be a difficult thing to navigate, especially when there isn't anybody else that you can go and say anything to, except the woman concerned and the guy who's affected. I don't know what you guys think. I suppose many of you will say, go and tell him, mate, get rid of her. But you see, the problem is, you also see it from the maybe a personal level. What would happen if it happened to you? Would you really want to know? Would you really feel that it's the best for you at the last point in your life to discover the person you thought you were with isn't really the person you thought she was? And after all, we're not necessarily going to live to 108 years of age. So why rock the boat when ignorance is bliss? But it is a troubling thought that these things do happen. And it's not just between yourself and maybe other foreigners who highlight the fact. You will also discover, looking around your own barangay, how many young men even have got a wife one day and then you see them up the bar or somewhere else going off with another woman. It seems to be quite a common occurrence. And I suppose it's brought about a little bit by the fact that there is no divorce here. So inevitably, these people who get themselves into this modern day situation, they've only got one thing to do, and that's to be unfaithful. Now, of course, that could be a dangerous prospect for a Filipino, especially because here the law apparently, and I take this from people in high places that have spoken with me, maybe initially in jest, but they say that a Filipino woman who finds her man in bed with a person that's not herself can actually legally take the life of that person. Now that's a bit like the old idea in France, crime of passion is no longer, I'm not sure whether it still applies in French law, but it does seem a little bit archaic as a law goes, where people are held responsible for the actions of they choose to take. But it's just another thought that entered my mind while I sit here ending the life of these weeds until they pop up again. And I just wondered how many of you put in that position of discovering that your partner, your wife, your girlfriend is seeing somebody else behind your back, or even maybe making sure you are aware, using it to maybe encourage you to leave and allow her to bring in the next generation of indoor loving here in the Philippines. And the other point that I have is that whilst your Filipino may express emotions that you understand, like the dear loss of a brother or a sister, and the feeling of how devastated they were for that. If you think about a relationship, that is in fact a bit like a death in the family as well. And you wonder why they can quite happily mourn the death of a sibling or other family member, and yet they don't understand the heartache and pain that they can impose on an older person who's come from another country, maybe to live out the rest of his or her life, only to be, in a sense, stabbed in the back a few years down the track. Of course, after a home's been built, fancy cars, overseas trips, you name it, that's okay. But like all of these videos, it's food for thought, and one can't help. There's there's a multitude of thoughts that can come into one's mind at any given time. Not just mine, I'm sure yours as well. And I hope that some of these videos can prompt you to think about how you would handle the various situations that are not necessarily common in the West, not in quite its entirety, but certainly familiar. I mean, we've all had, I'm sure, experienced or know of people who have played around on their husband or wife, and I'm sure you dealt with it the way you probably would have at any point. But I wonder if you would deal with it differently here in the Philippines, or would you take the bull by the horns and maybe point out to the blissful adulterer how what you been put in the position of knowing about, should you maybe spill the beans to the injured party? Well, as you can see, I'm getting closer to the camera, and therefore it's probably better that I ask you to give me a thumbs up, maybe subscribe, and maybe enjoy waiting for the next little snippet that comes to my brain when I'm next in the garden. So don't forget to give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I really do appreciate all of you and your comments, good and bad. So all the best, and I hope your Monday is as good for you as I'm hoping it will be for myself. So it's farewell. The evening is coming up, and we'll be getting ready to look after the dogs, who no doubt want their evening meal. So you have a great time. Enjoy your evening, enjoy your morning. If it's a Sunday morning, you're watching this from overseas. And we'll speak again soon. Bye now.